when Steve would pass the torch to Tim at the end of his life to become the CEO of Apple, telling Tim to not do what he would do, but to do what's best for Apple. Few could predict that Tim would be the one to transform Apple into the world's most valuable company, or third most valuable at the moment of making this video. But behind the polished persona, perfected talking points, and slick design products at Apple, who is Tim Cook really?
That allows them to accumulate more wealth than they could ever personally use.
Who is Tim Cook as a person? Is he actually a good person? I know it's kind of a silly question, but would you want to be his friend? Would you invite him in regardless of fame, introduce him to your friends and family? Critics argue that Tim has always lacked Steve's innovative vision for Apple, and instead his vision is solely focused on profitability, which sort of makes sense when you look at his background in manufacturing, if that's with IBM or Compaq, and the whole reason why Steve sought him out and wanted him to join Apple in the first place. And Apple's value in the stock market has skyrocketed under Tim Cook, going from about $350 billion when Steve left the company to over $3 trillion now. These are unfathomable amounts of money. I want you to keep that in mind, because even people that try to have a hard time to, because the human mind isn't conditioned to. Tim Cook follows a strict daily routine. He wakes up before 5 a.m. and eats the same brand of cereal every morning, and frequents the same company cafe, Cafe Mac, for lunch and dinner, and uses his morning to focus his day around critical tasks that he must endure going forward in the day, and he enjoys his quiet time. This, according to this Fortune article I found, it seems he is a productivity machine, operating with a level of discipline that allows him to balance Apple's massive operational demands while maintaining his personal commitments to fitness. Amazing. His personal brand, at least through my eyes, is like Apple's, intertwined with Apple's. Minimalistic, aesthetic, mixed with productivity, with an eye towards the future of innovation and building a better world. If you liked the video, why not subscribe, ring the bell, and then you'll get notifications. You can always turn it off later. Now, the thing is it's really hard to know where Apple ends and Tim begins. But as a viewer, something that I've found interesting is watching enough interviews and you start to see some of his tells. You start to see little moments where he has a bit of more ego than he normally would. Or you can tell he actually does care. You can tell those little human instincts, and it turns out he may actually not be a robot after all.
The Magic Mouse, it was also an incredible moment. Getting the ergonomics well done and was key.
With Magic Mouse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tim has taken a strong stance both with himself and with Apple when it comes to privacy, environmental stability, and LGBTQ rights. For example, in 2016, when the government wanted Apple to create a backdoor, Tim said no, and he would not do it. He put his foot down and said, you're going to have to write legislation. He's not just going to go behind all the voters' backs.
To oppose your government on something doesn't feel good. And to oppose it on something where we are advocating for civil liberties, which they are supposed to protect, it is incredibly ironic. But this is where we find ourselves. And for all of those people who want to have a voice, but they're afraid, we are standing up.
And when it comes to Apple and the environment, they've committed to be carbon neutral by 2030 and have made drastic strides going in that direction.
It can be done in a way that others can replicate, which is very important for us. We want to be the ripple in the pond. We want people to look at this and say, I can do that too, or I can do half of that. We want people to look at this and rip it off.
We're focused across the company, and my department in particular, on ensuring every device that our customers own and operate, the electricity they use to charge it is offset by renewable energy.
And on the personal side, Tim came out as gay in 2014, becoming the first Fortune 500 company with a CEO that was out of the closet. closet, in which he said that it was worth the cost if it helped others. It's weird that there were still costs in 2014, but I guess that's the world we live in. Many argue that Tim's principles line up a little too well with Apple's business interests. For example, privacy is a good marketing thing to say, and so is being carbon neutral. It aligned with the establishment of the time, and people celebrated them for it. Now, when it comes to privacy, I think they more or less stand by it, especially when compared to competitors like Google and Facebook, who are absolute monsters. It would have been a lot easier to buckle during that whole 2016 fiasco. In recent times, he's buckled to an administration that threatens who he is as a person in a lot of ways. He's rich enough not to really be affected, but who is he really as a person standing by his principles when he's willing to kind of do what they want him to, or at least say what they want him to?
We do not focus on politics, and I recognize that everything kind of, unfortunately these days, tends to break down in that way, but we focus on the policy itself. But at the end of the day, we'll be judged more by, did we stand up for what we believed in?
To be clear, I like the idea of manufacturing coming back to the United States, especially if it's not completely done with robots, but the whole thing seems pretty forced. Why didn't he do this before? And there's been promises in the past that didn't come to fruition.
Put a big investment in our country. We appreciate it very much, Tim Apple.
At the same time, he wants to keep the products cheap. He doesn't want tariffs to affect the bottom line of his shareholders, and he's trying to stay above water as a businessman. They're definitely trying to stay neutral, which I get it. I don't think they're evil for doing that. I wish that he would do more with the power that he's given, being the CEO of one of the most major corporations in the world.
But I'm telling you from our heart, we believe in treating everyone with dignity and respect. And that's how we show up as a company. We believe in being a part of the community and trying to advocate for change rather than pulling the mode up and going away.
He doesn't have to do the things that he's been doing, and some corporations haven't been. Under Tim Cook, Apple has continued to innovate. There hasn't been anything quite as revolutionary as the iPhone, but I mean, that was like a once-in-a-generation type of revolution. He did launch the Apple Watch a couple years after taking the helm at Apple. The HomePod that same year, and later the Apple Vision Pro. None were quite as successful as the iPhone or as revolutionary as the iPhone. Just because something's not as successful as one product, it doesn't mean that it isn't also innovating and moving the tech industry and Apple forward. Apple has always been known for perfecting products rather than making new ones. Even the iPhone was not the first smartphone. Some people just see this as copying things, others see this as revolutionary. The iPhone definitely was revolutionary because it did enough things different that it became its own category, but it still wasn't the first smartphone. It was Apple taking something that already existed and innovating on it. Also under Tim, the ecosystem has tremendously improved. Of course, the ecosystem was around during Steve Jobs' time at Apple, but under Tim Cook, it really has expanded, and I would argue is maybe the thing that's kept them on top the most, with iMessage and the blue and green bubble war. The more Apple things that you buy, better the ecosystem becomes. Now, my view is that Apple has changed. Steve had a vision and he wanted to make it real, and moreover, when they brought Steve back, it was out of desperation. They got rid of him because he wasn't good for business, and they brought him back because they were desperate. At the time, Apple needed to try stuff or they were going to sink. Without drastic changes, like, they were basically doomed as a company. Do I think Apple is still innovating the way that it would if Steve Jobs was still CEO? Absolutely not. There's no way. But there's also an argument to be had that if Steve Jobs was still CEO, he may have come up with some crazy idea that bankrupted the company. And Apple Vision Pro not being successful really isn't an argument, because they were risking something by making the Apple Vision Pro, and that is innovation. And honestly, I think there's a future for it, but that has nothing to do with if Apple is innovating or not. When it comes to the iPhone, especially the cameras, you look at one iPhone to the next year's iPhone, they're almost exactly the same, but if you look at one iPhone to 5 years from whatever iPhone, it looks drastically different. And there's no question that Tim continues to innovate behind the scenes when it comes to manufacturing and the way that they make money on their business, for better or worse. The truth about any of these guys with power is you got to look at what they do, not what they say. No matter if it's Tim Cook or the president, you got to get into the paper. Like, they're so good at saying things that sound good when they're talking into the camera and on stage and in interviews. They're like mechanical about it. And some of them are better than others, but Tim and our current president are masters at sounding good. But if you dig deep, and I'm not saying Tim is that bad, but if you dig deep in a lot of these guys, Peter Thiel, any of these guys, they do very different things than what they're saying. Or sometimes maybe the way it sounds good, but in reality, it's far from the way it sounds. So what do you think of Tim Cook? Originally, I meant to do this video a bit different, and I have a more structured way to do other CEOs and rich people while we watch the rich. This whole channel's still pretty much coming together as I figure out how I want to do things and what I should be doing. Let me know if you have any good ideas. But if you did enjoy this video or any of the videos on my channel and want to support my work, please subscribe. It means the world. And if you liked this video, maybe you'll like this one. Very meta. Not like Zuckerberg meta, but like meta before he tried, or I guess stole the name.